I am known as Lisa Rowe. I am in my early 40s. I can't recall the last moment when someone inquired about my well-being and truly cared about the answer. My husband, Mark, serves in the military. He has traversed the landscapes of Afghanistan, Germany, and the Philippines, spending more moments abroad than on home soil. Our journey together has spanned 14 years of marriage. I once kept track of the days he was away. At that point, I ceased to keep track entirely. It simplified the process. Our home rests on the periphery of a serene community, where the lawns mirror one another and the greetings are but a whisper of warmth. A location that appears perfectly polished on the surface. Perhaps that is the reason I selected it. It reflects my essence. Last week, a tempest roared through, toppling a section of our backyard fence. Nothing disastrous, merely two panels slumped like weary shoulders. It wasn't until the following morning, as I sipped my coffee in solitude on the porch, that I became aware. On that particular Sunday, I recall those days, for Sundays once held a special significance. Gathering at the church, sharing a delightful brunch, and filling the air with laughter. Now they simply signified silence. The silence enveloped me, so profound that the sound of my own breath echoed in the stillness. I sent Mark a picture of the fence. 3 hours later he responded, "You will find a way. You consistently do." That's who I had become. A person who had unraveled the mystery. Not an individual who experienced care. Not an individual you inquire about. A solitary figure mending the frayed edges of existence, unnoticed by the world around her. I remained transfixed by the destruction when his voice broke through the silence. "Do you require assistance with that?" I pivoted on my heel. He stood on the edge of the lawn, a rake in hand, as he wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. "Jake." He had settled in a fortnight prior alongside his mother, a woman in her 60s, her hair losing its luster and her eyes perpetually carrying a hint of weariness. I had observed him tending to her yard, carrying in her groceries, always quiet and reserved. He was my junior, perhaps in their late 20s. Powerful limbs, gentle gaze, and that certain tranquility resides deep within some individuals. "Oh, it's perfectly fine," I replied. "I shall reach out to someone." He inclined his head. "I mean no disrespect, but it seems unnecessary to hire someone when I have the tools and a free afternoon to help." I felt compelled to take a stand. Let it be known that I could manage it. I was perfectly capable on my own. Yet fatigue enveloped me. Thus I agreed. And in that subtle, hushed affirmation, a transformation occurred. He approached, leaned in for a better view, and crouched to examine the panel closely. His fingers glided over the fractured wood with an unexpected tenderness, as if he were caressing something of great significance. "You're fortunate," he remarked. "It might have turned out differently." I inclined my head in agreement. That's what I continually remind myself. He raised his gaze to meet mine then. Truly observed. In a fleeting moment I lost the very essence of inhalation. Our conversation was sparse that initial afternoon. He toiled. I procured a refreshing lemonade. I lingered at the kitchen window, observing him for far too long. The flame was absent. There is no controversy. Now a serene essence fills the space once occupied by solitude. As he gathered his tools and offered me a brief wave farewell, a smile spread across my face. Authentically. As I shut the door softly, a quiet voice within me murmured, "He observed." He returned the following day. I did not request that of him. I had honestly thought that he was merely being friendly. It was one of those fleeting moments, a noble act that individuals undertake to soothe their own conscience, particularly young men who still possess a flicker of that youthful urge to mend what is fractured. Yet again he appeared, clad in the same jeans, exuding that familiar quiet energy, positioned by the gate with his tool bag casually draped over one shoulder. "Do you mind if I complete the fence?" he inquired. I thought it would nag at me all week if I didn't. I assured him without a doubt. I expressed my gratitude to him. Yet, what remained unspoken was the sensation of having someone willingly return. Mark never returned ahead of schedule. Jake toiled for a full hour. Next to. Once more, I presented him with a glass of lemonade, accompanied by a delicate plate of crackers and cheese. Nothing extravagant. Yet, the way his expression brightened, as if I had presented him with a grand banquet, filled my heart with a bittersweet pang. "You truly didn't need to," he remarked. "I understand," I responded. "Perhaps that was my desire all along." His gaze lingered on me for a moment that felt just a heartbeat too extended, not in an inappropriate manner, simply out of curiosity, as if he couldn't fathom how anyone could utter such words with sincerity. Perched on the brink of the deck, we lingered as he paused for a moment of respite. The sun started to cast its gentle warmth upon the wood below us. His hands bore the fine powder of sawdust, marked by the rugged texture of calluses. Faint traces of red polish lingered on my nails from a week prior, the kind I had applied simply to experience a change. He inquired about my occupation. I mentioned to him that I had once taught middle school English, but I had ceased that endeavor following the third move. "Do you long for it?" he inquired. "On certain days," I remarked. "Primarily, I find myself longing for the sense of being valuable." He nodded as if he grasped the concept. Upon inquiring about his life prior to returning to town, he replied, "I was responsible for maintenance at a senior facility in the vast expanse of Utah. However, my mother fell ill, prompting my return home." His voice lowered when he uttered the word mom. Deep, unwavering, imbued with the gravity of a personal secret. I refrained from exerting any pressure. "I have just finished listening." That was the essence of Jake. He spoke little, allowing the silence to linger without interruption. He allowed moments to unfold naturally. He allowed me to inhale deeply. We lingered in that moment for some time. Serene, harmonious. For the first time in ages, I no longer felt like a woman poised on the sidelines, waiting for someone else's life to begin anew. A sense of presence enveloped me. As he departed that afternoon, he remarked, "I'll return tomorrow. Simply require a bit of reinforcement for the posts." "There's no need to." "I wish to," he expressed. Merely. As though that response ought to suffice. Perhaps it truly was. That evening, I found myself at the kitchen sink, gazing out at the fence still in disarray, reflecting on the manner in which he expressed it. I desired to. It had been years since Mark had uttered those words. "It's not centered on my experiences. It's not centered on us." In an instant, kindness took on an air of peril. For those who have lingered in the shadows for an eternity, even the faintest act of kindness can illuminate the soul like a brilliant beam of light. Uncertainty gripped me as I stood at the threshold, torn between the urge to embrace it and the instinct to flee. A chair rests quietly behind the shed. It's unremarkable, aged verdant, with a hint of rust on its legs. A flimsy patio chair that lingers in your yard, perpetually on the verge of being discarded, yet it remains stubbornly in place. There were moments long ago when I would find myself sitting there, watching Mark as he barbecued or tended to the lawn. In those days when our lives intertwined with familiar patterns, now it had seamlessly blended into the backdrop. Neglected. Similar to the majority of my being. On that particular afternoon, Jake inquired whether he might be able to borrow a screwdriver. It had broken right in the middle of the turn, and by chance I found an old toolbox hidden away in the garage. As I extended it towards him, a smile broke across his face. "I never would have guessed you were so skilled with your hands." I merely shrugged. I grew weary of relying on others to make things right. He chuckled at that, not with derision but with a soft warmth. It was as if he grasped deeper truths than he revealed. As the pace of work diminished, he rested against the shed's side, brushing the sweat from his forehead. "Is it all right if I join you?" he inquired, gesturing towards the chair with a nod. "Please proceed," I urged. "Simply avoid leaning too far back. It's one of those perilous pitfalls." He took a seat regardless. There I was, a pitcher of water in hand, caught in a moment of indecision. Should I step inside or remain outside? "Come, sit with me," he invited, giving a gentle tap on the cooler lid that served as his makeshift side table. For a moment I paused. Then I took a seat. The sun hung low in the sky, filtering through the gaps in the leaves. We found ourselves caught between the embrace of shadow and the warmth of golden light. A moment that quietly unfolds, demanding no spotlight. It simply is. Serene and abundant. Jake extended his legs, reaching out with a languid grace. "This is delightful." I inclined my head in agreement. Indeed it is. Our words fell away, leaving only silence in their wake. Maintain discretion. There are no inquiries. Two individuals sat together, enveloped in a silence that required no interruption. Occasionally, his arm would lightly graze mine as he moved. It wasn't intentional, not extended, just a subtle hint to evoke his presence. I was present. A smudge of dirt rested on his cheek, just beneath the bone. I nearly extended my hand to clean it away. Nearly. Yet I refrained. I turned my gaze elsewhere toward the fence, perpetually lacking one panel, perpetually ajar. Defenseless. Revealed. Somewhat akin to my essence. Jake finally rose to his feet. He mentioned that he needed to see how his mother was doing. I expressed my gratitude to him once more. For the assistance. In service of the organization. For all the things I couldn't quite articulate. He offered me a fleeting smile. You really don't need to express your gratitude each time you realize. Perhaps I enjoy expressing it, I remarked. He gave a slight nod before turning to depart. Just as he was about to vanish from sight, he hesitated for a moment. Have you ever sensed that individuals only pay attention when something is damaged? His voice carried a gentle quality. He remained with his back to her. I hesitated before responding. Yet, in the stillness of the night, as I reclined in bed gazing at the ceiling, I murmured softly into the shadows. Indeed. It was meant to be the final day. Jake completed the task of reinforcing the posts, meticulously sanding down the edges, and carefully reattaching the final panel. The fence appeared intact once more, sturdy, upright, a clear boundary separating my backyard from the outside world. As I observed him laboring from the kitchen window, an unfamiliar sadness began to unfurl within my chest. The mere act of repairing the fence left me with an unsettling sense of vulnerability. I hadn't fully grasped how accustomed I had become to his presence. The crunch of his footsteps against the gravel echoed in the stillness. His voice enveloped the space, a gentle presence that never overshadowed the soft murmur of his existence. As he rapped on the back door that evening, the sun had already started its descent. With a small toolbox cradled in one hand and a beer leisurely grasped in the other, he stood poised for the task ahead. Everything is complete, he remarked. A smile graced my lips. I ought to compensate you in some way. He gave a slight shake of his head. Absolutely not. Allow me the pleasure of preparing dinner for you, I proposed before I could catch my breath. You've spent almost a week out here. He paused, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. Then they said, all right. Only if I lend a hand in the kitchen. Thus the journey commenced. We engaged in the act of cooking together, if one could truly refer to it as such. I prepared a pot of boiling water and added the pasta. He gently stirred the sauce. We navigated the kitchen with an ease that suggested familiarity, as if we were attuned to one another's movements. As he leaned across me to retrieve a spoon from the drawer, his arm lightly grazed against mine. Cozy. Unwavering. My breath hitched in my throat. We dined on the deck. Uncomplicated fare. Accompanied by 2 glasses of red wine. The air held a gentle warmth, light and unburdened, while the sky transitioned into a profound velvet blue, imbuing the world with an unexpected sense of sincerity. He shared a bit more about his mother. She had found a semblance of stability, yet remained delicate. He was uncertain about the duration of his stay in town. I inclined my head and replied, "It must be difficult." He gazed at me lingeringly and deliberately. "Indeed it is," he replied. "Yet, there's a certain beauty in the act of caring for someone once more. Are you aware?" I gazed into my glass, watching the wine dance and swirl within its confines. "Indeed," I replied. "I believe I do." The ensuing silence held no awkwardness. The atmosphere was thick with intensity, electrified, similar to the atmosphere just prior to a tempest. I rose to carry the dishes indoors. He trailed behind, seizing the glasses. In the kitchen, I extended my hand toward the faucet, yet the sponge eluded my grasp, tumbling into the sink with a resounding splash. Jake moved in, drawing near, and in a moment of instinct, devoid of forethought, he grasped the sponge, activated the water, and began to scrub. I lingered at his side, observing the fluid motion of his hands, Powerful, tender, exacting. He remarked, barely glancing in my direction. You shouldn't have to bear it all by yourself. I chose not to respond. If I had allowed myself, tears would have surely flowed. Once we had finished, I offered him a towel. Our fingers brushed against each other. Only for a moment. Yet it resembled a spark igniting deep within my heart. He hesitated at the threshold. One foot in the doorway. One is out. I appreciate the dinner, he remarked. Truly. I inclined my head, a fear of words holding me back. Fearful of the sound my voice may produce. He cast his gaze in my direction. The very same gaze I had encountered in the seat tucked away behind the shed. Not inquiring. Refraining from making assumptions. Merely observing. And then with a gentle whisper, so gentle, he spoke. Sleep well, Lisa. When my name was uttered in that way, it was as if a gentle hand rested against the small of my back. I shut the door firmly after he stepped out, and reclined against it, heart racing, cheeks aglow, yearning for something I had long denied myself. In the depths of that night he filled my dreams. Not in the manner that one might expect, not the chaotic sort of dream, not figures entwined or mouths pressed together in urgency. Absolutely not. Silence enveloped the surroundings. We found ourselves in the heart of my kitchen. The gentle glow lingers above the basin, the familiar, weathered tiles underfoot. He stood behind me, his fingers delicately sweeping my hair aside, letting it cascade over my shoulder. His fingers grazed my skin, yet it ignited a shiver that coursed down my spine. In the dream he uttered my name. Only a single time. Gentle. A blend of inquiry and assurance, intertwined seamlessly. As I pivoted, deliberately and with a measured grace, I leaned my forehead against his chest. That's all there is to it. There was no kiss. There will be no admission of guilt. Two souls discovering a sanctuary where the pain no longer felt so isolating. Tears glistened on my cheeks as I stirred from sleep. Sunlight began to filter through the slats of the blinds. Outside, the birds sang as if the world remained untouched. Yet within me all had changed. I rose gradually, as though the imprint of his hand still rested in my hair. For what felt like an eternity I remained still. I neglected to check my phone. I didn't go to make coffee. There I was, sitting in silence, my gaze fixed on the wall as if it held the key to my questions. This was more than a mere infatuation. It was neither curiosity nor boredom. It was a yearning. A subtle, haunting sort that takes hold before you even realize it has started. And what could be more dire? It was a pleasant sensation. It pulsated with vitality. It felt as if a part of me, one I hadn't realized was dormant, had suddenly been roused from its slumber. I reassured myself that it was merely a figment of my imagination, merely a manifestation of solitude, a fleeting moment. Yet aspirations do not shield you from confronting your reflection. Visions do not cause your hands to tremble as you fill your cup with coffee. Visions do not compel you to linger by the window, anticipating the silhouette of a man crossing your yard. As I caught sight of him, his shirt clinging to his back in the sweltering morning heat, wiping the sweat from his brow while assisting his mother into the passenger seat of her car, an inexplicable tightness gripped my chest. I swiftly withdrew from the window, ensuring he wouldn't catch a glimpse of me. Not due to any sense of shame. Yet, a part of me yearned to dash outside and inquire about the dreams that danced through his mind the previous night. Fear gripped me at the thought of his words. That afternoon Mark made the call. The clock approached 3 p.m. As I found myself in the laundry room, meticulously folding shirts that were not my own. The device pulsed softly against the surface of the counter. His name illuminated the display. Recognizable. Remote. A snapshot from a past existence I once knew. For a moment I paused, weighing my response. Hello, I said, trying to infuse my voice with a cheerful note. Hey babe. His voice was lively and quick, just as it always was when he reached out amidst his busy schedule. I have a brief moment to spare before I set off once more. I wanted to touch base. I rested my back against the dryer. Is everything all right? Indeed. Sure, that's acceptable. We're shifting gears early, and we may find ourselves back home sooner than anticipated. Perhaps a week or two prior. A sensation stirred within my chest. It ought to have been a sense of relief. Yet it was not. That's quite satisfactory, I remarked. That is truly excellent. A silence lingered in the air, stretching across the line. Are you okay? He inquired. You seem weary. I gulped. I simply didn't rest well last night. Perhaps you ought to venture out a bit more, he remarked, a chuckle escaping his lips. Take the time to share a meal with another. Or browse. Indulge in a little self-care. I pondered, unaware that he remained oblivious to my prior actions. He remains unaware that the fence has been repaired, or who repaired it, or how I've been perched by windows, longing for a visage that isn't his. I shall make an attempt, I replied. He continued to speak, discussing logistics, delving into base politics, and sharing thoughts on a new member of his unit who struggled to adhere to commands. I allowed his voice to envelop me, responding with subtle nods and the occasional when appropriate. I had come to understand the cadence of these conversations. I could sense the moments when he sought a reply, and when he merely required the freedom to express himself into the phone. Yet I found myself absent in that moment. In the dim light of my laundry room, I found myself gripping a t-shirt I had no recollection of folding, my gaze fixed on the phone in my hand as if it were an artifact from another life. He didn't inquire about my recent activities. I didn't inquire about the fence. Never inquired about my solitude. I refrained from offering it. For if I were to do so, if I were to crack open even a single door, all that lies within would come rushing forth. As the call concluded, I found myself gazing at the wall for what felt like an eternity. And then tears streamed down my face. Not due to any cruelty on Mark's part. Not due to any wrongdoing on his part. Yet, he never inquired about my well-being. Not quite. For it was a stranger, a man who scarcely knew my name, who had gazed into the depths of my soul more profoundly than the one who promised me his love ever could. Under the cloak of night, I ventured barefoot toward the fence, glided my fingers over the sleek polished surface of the fresh wood, and murmured into the void. What occurs when an individual mends more than merely the shattered pieces you reveal to them? He arrived shortly after the sun dipped below the horizon. His arrival took me by surprise. I was dressed simply, an old cotton dress, my feet bare against the deck, a half glass of white wine cradled in my hand, an evening that wraps around you like a soft embrace, causing time to slip away unnoticed. His voice reached me before his presence came into view. Is the fence still standing strong? I turned and there he stood just beyond the gate, wearing that effortless half-smile, the kind that never demanded much yet always sent my heart racing. It's perfect, I remarked, tucking a loose strand of hair behind my ear. He crossed the threshold, more deliberately than before, as if he were gauging the heaviness of the atmosphere surrounding us. He stood with his hands tucked away in his pockets. His shirt adhered to him ever so gently in the sweltering summer heat. I was giving my mom a ride, he remarked. I thought I'd drop in. Only for a moment. I inclined my head in agreement. Yet he remained. He ascended the steps and rested against the railing next to me. Near. More intimate than ever. Not quite inappropriate, not at this moment, but enough that the distance between us seemed less a barrier of safety and more a beckoning invitation. We lingered in that moment, observing the fireflies twirl above the grass, each of us feigning that this was merely a platonic encounter. Yet I sensed it deeply. The current flows. The burden of all that remained unspoken, all that we had danced around with caution. The unvoiced dream that lingered within me. The way his name had hung on my lips throughout the week. He extended his hand toward the deck rail, perhaps to grasp a small leaf, but in doing so, his arm lightly grazed mine. It was no mere coincidence. This time it's a firm no. I chose to stay put. He cast his gaze in my direction then, completely immersed. His eyes were open and unshielded. They acted without care. They had their doors wide open. In pursuit. Inquiring. And mine, may the heavens assist me, responded. The details of who made the initial move escape my memory. Perhaps it was a shared experience between us. Or perhaps not at all. Perhaps it was merely the pull of gravity. But in an instant, his hand found its way to mine. Cozy. Steadfast. Steady resolve. My gaze fell upon our fingers. Motionless, quiet, intertwined as if they had been familiar far longer than we ever were. He remained silent. He remained distant. He remained still, grasping my hand tightly. And in that instant, that delicate, quaking, earth-shattering instant, I realized I could never return. For it transcended mere longing. It was acknowledgement. As if my body held onto a memory that my mind had labored for years to erase. I longed for the warmth of an embrace. Not merely touched, embraced. A woman who had never known the weight of invisibility. As an individual deserving of attention. He released his grip after a brief pause. With great care. Like letting go of a delicate treasure. "I ought to leave," he murmured, his voice scarcely audible. I inclined my head in agreement. Yet I remained steadfast, my gaze unwavering. He didn't either. As he finally turned and descended the steps, a deep yearning within me urged to call him back. Yet I refrained. I lingered in the stillness, my palm lingering with the warmth he had left behind, and murmured softly into the darkness. "The hour has grown too late." 3 days later it unfolded. He chose not to knock this time. He sent a message. Only 4 words. "Are you out there at the moment?" I was indeed. I had been sitting there for nearly an hour, feigning interest in a book whose pages remained untouched. The warmth of the evening enveloped the surroundings once more. Summer enveloped everything: skin, fabric, constraint. "Indeed," I responded. Moments later the gentle creak of the side gate reached my ears. Remained seated. He approached the corner with deliberate slowness, as if he wished to avoid startling anything, especially not me. He donned a simple black t-shirt paired with jeans. This time there are no tools at hand. Nothing but authenticity. Only him. And I. He took a seat next to me uninvited. Our knees touched gently, a fleeting connection in the quiet moment. This time I chose to stay put. Silence enveloped us at first. The night vibrated with life, cicadas chirping, the soft whir of distant lawn sprinklers, and the flicker of a neighbor's porch light illuminating the darkness. All feels so mundane. And yet, everything felt extraordinary. "The other night keeps replaying in my mind," he murmured softly. I couldn't either. However, I did not express that. He cast his gaze upon our hands, which lay together on the bench that separated us. Untouched. "Not at this moment." He then shifted his gaze in my direction. "I find myself pondering whether this is truly wrong," he continued. "All I can say is that there's nowhere else I'd rather be at this moment." I found myself shaking uncontrollably, not through fear. Yet, the depth of my desire to immerse myself in something genuine was so profound that I was willing to shatter everything else in its wake. Our gazes locked. "I'm weary of feigning that I'm not alone," I murmured. And that was the reality. That encompassed everything. He lifted his hand deliberately and gently tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. The gesture was remarkably tender. Unhurried. Not asserting. Simply observing me. As his hand hovered close to my cheek, I let my eyes flutter shut. That was everything it required. His lips brushed against mine, gently, as if he feared I might disappear. There is no rush. Only warmth. And something more profound. I returned his kiss. Not out of any intention to deceive anyone. Yet, in that instant I found myself not as a wife to anyone. I identified as a woman. And I longed for a touch that would make me feel significant. The kiss lingered, growing more profound with each passing moment. Remaining cautious. Silence lingers. Yet, innocence has faded away. His hand glided to the nape of my neck, and I sensed my entire being dissolve into the intimate distance that separated us. All the weeks of restraint, of courteous quietude and almost encounters, they crumbled like a wave that had long awaited its cue. We separated only when the need for air insisted upon it. As I opened my eyes, I found him gazing at me with a reverence that felt almost divine. Silence enveloped us. Silence enveloped the moment, leaving no words to bridge the chasm between them. He pressed his forehead to mine. For the first time in years, a sense of solitude lifted from my shoulders. On the following night he returned. It's uncertain whether we had any intentions behind it. I'm uncertain whether having a plan would have instilled a greater sense of control, a more justifiable stance. It was of no consequence. The moment his lips met mine, Everything had already started. That instant when I chose not to intervene. The instant I ceased the charade. 2 candles flickered to life in the kitchen. Not due to any anticipation of his arrival, but rather because the harsh glare of the overhead light was unbearable. It seemed excessively severe. Unquestionably authentic. I sought a gentler touch. Something that offers grace. He rapped lightly on the door before pushing the screen open, a gesture as familiar to him as breathing, as if it belonged to him all along. He entered with a measured pace, his hands tucked away in his pockets. Silence enveloped us. I found myself gazing at him from a distance, and suddenly, an unexpected fissure opened within my chest. Perhaps it was the intensity of his gaze directed towards me. Perhaps it was the manner in which I hadn't experienced such a sense of being desired in years, not with an insatiable hunger, but with a gentle tenderness. He strolled over, halted right before me, and in that moment I pressed my lips against his. Without a moment's doubt, my fingers traced the contours of his shoulders. His fingers gently embraced my waist, and the distance that once separated us dissolved, as if it had always been a fleeting illusion. Time seemed to stretch endlessly.
No geridum fastenin.
No appropriated sighs. It was a gradual, revealing disintegration, akin to something both revered and perilous, nestled between 2 souls who understood they had long crossed the threshold of no return. He trailed behind me as I ascended the stairs. It was an experience that seemed otherworldly, imbued with a sense of deep respect. I recall the moment he lingered in the threshold of my bedroom, as if he were anticipating a shift in my resolve. I did not. I longed for him to notice my presence. I longed to experience, even if just for a fleeting moment, the freedom of existing for my own sake. Not as a wife, not as a mere placeholder, not as someone who simply waited. He caressed me as if I held significance, as if every single inch of my skin held a story begging to be etched in memory. And when we united, it transcended mere pleasure. It revolved around evidence. Evidence that I remained capable of sensation, that I remained unscathed by the passage of time, that my heart still beats when someone gazes at me with anything beyond mere obligation. In the stillness that followed, we remained quiet. My head lay gently upon his chest. His fingers softly glided in delicate patterns along my arm. The shadows danced upon the ceiling, while I attuned myself to the steady, measured cadence of his breathing. I held back my tears. Not at that time. I simply allowed myself to exist. Secured. Seeking. Recognized. Yet, lurking beneath the surface of warmth, a chilling reality took root. Price would be involved, and it would arrive shortly. In that dim, silent chamber, I shut my eyes and surrendered to the gravity of the moment. At times, it's easy to overlook just how much of your essence has slipped away, until someone reaches into the depths of you that have remained untouched for years. He departed just as the first light of dawn began to break. It wasn't due to my request. Yet he was aware. The sun had yet to breach the horizon. The gentle muted haze of dawn caresses the panes, a tender whisper of morning's arrival. The atmosphere was charged, as if time itself had paused, suspended in a moment of anticipation. Perhaps that was merely my own perception. I observed from the bedroom window as he strolled across the lawn. His shoulders slumped, hands tucked into his pockets, just as he had come weeks earlier, wearing a smile and carrying a toolbox. Yet, on this occasion he bore something different. I too did the same. As the door clicked shut behind him, an overwhelming silence enveloped the house. In a state of unrest. Unkempt. Simply. Genuine. I reclined in bed, gazing at the ceiling, as the heavy burden of it all pressed down upon my chest. What steps do you take following an evening such as that? Once you step over that threshold, not in a hasty, impulsive blunder, but with a measured, intentional grace, as if it was destined to unfold all along, you find no sense of pride. You sense a lack of freedom. You sense a division within yourself. There exists the woman everyone still perceives you to be, and the one you have finally released from her confines. 3 days later, Greg returned home. The duffel bag landed with a resonant thud by the entrance, a sound steeped in familiarity. He pressed his lips to my cheek as he always did. Habitual practice. Practiced. He inquired about my well-being. I assured them I was okay. He remained silent on the matter of the fence. He remained oblivious to the new panels. I failed to notice that the chair behind the shed had been shifted. Overlooked me. During dinner he shared stories about base updates and introduced me to unfamiliar faces. He spoke endlessly, and I smiled, nodded, replenished his glass, the intricate dance of matrimony. Throughout it all, Jake's hand lingered at the nape of my neck, a constant presence I couldn't shake off. The silence that lingers between us speaks volumes, conveying emotions that words could never capture. That night, as Greg reached for me in bed, I chose to turn my body toward the window instead. He remained silent, offering no questions. I chose not to extend the offer. The following morning, I discovered my phone pulsating with a new message. Jake, are you all right? 3 words. Uncomplicated. Proceed with caution. Heartbreaking. It had been years since anyone had posed that question to me. Not quite. My gaze lingered on the screen, time slipping away unnoticed. Then I began to type. I'm uncertain. And that was the reality. Uncertainty loomed before me, leaving me in a state of bewilderment about what lay ahead. I was uncertain about how to reveal the woman I had secretly become, to step into the light. I was uncertain if I could bear the weight of my actions, or return to a life devoid of ever experiencing it once more. Yet I was aware of this. A man once repaired my fence. However, in the process, he unveiled every fragment of my being that I had concealed under layers of courtesy, obligation, and the lingering resonance of another's identity. And now the true inquiry lay not in my actions. It was how I would embrace the fragment of myself he had resurrected.